Tae-jin was 27, dangerously wealthy, and weeks away from a politically engineered marriage that would merge two of Seoul's most ruthless tech dynasties. From the outside, his headquarters was a monolithic structure of black glass and brushed steel, a modern fortress that whispered of unspeakable power. Inside, every movement was monitored, every breath measured, and every employee understood that Tae-jin was not just a tech prodigy. In the shadows of the underground, he was the newly crowned king of a digital mafia. He had the striking, heart-stopping visuals of a K-pop idol, flawless porcelain skin, raven hair styled with effortless precision, and eyes like shards of obsidian. But behind that beautiful face was an icy, lethal control. Then Zoya arrived. When the black SUV pulled up to the private gates, Zoya didn't check her makeup or smooth her tailored dark suit. Instead, her eyes meticulously swept the perimeter, logging camera blind spots and guard rotations with the instinct of a predator. She was 26, a former underground operative from London, and she was breathtaking. She was a brown-skinned woman with the fierce architectural bone structure of a young Naomi Campbell, high, arrogant cheekbones, full lips, and eyes that held the terrifying calm of a storm. When she walked into the security wing, the executives watching the monitors fell silent. They knew she had once dismantled 3 armed men in a hotel with nothing but her bare hands. They also knew Tae-jin, a man who obsessively controlled the temperature of his rooms and the breathing space of his employees, was going to hate her. Zoya stepped into Tae-jin's expansive, dimly lit office. For a long, heavy beat, neither spoke. Tae-jin looked up from his mahogany desk, his dark eyes sweeping over her towering model-like frame. Most people unconsciously softened their voices or bowed their heads to make him comfortable. Zoya did neither. She held his gaze, her posture radiating an aggressive, unapologetic readiness. The physical contrast between them was striking, his pale, sharp perfection against her rich, glowing bronze skin. The air in the room instantly thickened, heavy with an electric, undeniable heat. "So," Tae-jin murmured, his voice a low, gravelly baritone but sent a shiver down the spine. "You're the security prodigy my board forced upon me." "They didn't force you," Zoya replied, her voice smooth and dark like aged honey, as she stepped closer, the scent of bergamot and danger following her. "They convinced you. There is a difference." Tae-jin's jaw tightened. He stood up, slowly unbuttoning his suit jacket, and walked around his desk until he was mere inches from her. He was used to people trembling in his shadow. Zoya didn't even blink. The raw proximity between them crackled. He could see the pulse beating at the base of her long, elegant neck. She could smell the expensive amber cologne on his skin. It was a clash of titans, and neither was willing to surrender. "You speak with a lot of confidence for someone who just walked into my territory," Tae-jin whispered, leaning just enough to invade her personal space, testing her. Zoya didn't back away. Instead, she tilted her chin up, her lips grazing the space just below his jaw. "I speak confidently because I've spent the last 2 weeks reading your threat reports," she countered smoothly, dropping a classified folder onto his desk. 3 credible assassination attempts in the last 14 months, 2 dismissed as accidents, 1 covered up. Someone in your inner circle is trying to put a bullet in that pretty head of yours. The room went deadly still. Tae-jin's eyes flashed with a sudden dark intensity. "You think the threat is internal?" "I know it is," Zoya said, her voice dropping to a sensual whisper as she held his gaze. "They know your schedule, they know your habits, and if I can map your vulnerabilities in 10 minutes, so can they." Across the penthouse, in a lavish, sunlit suite, Gia watched the interaction through a hidden security feed. Gia was Tae-jin's fiancée, a gorgeous, politically groomed heiress who understood how to play the game of power. As she sipped her tea, her sharp eyes caught the subtle shift in Tae-jin's body language. He was leaning into Zoya. He was challenged, and more dangerously, he was captivated. Gia smiled slowly, setting her teacup down. She recognized the thick, undeniable chemistry crackling through the screen. Over the next few days, Zoya ripped Tae-jin's security protocols apart. She removed senior guards who were too predictable, detonating arguments among the old guard executives. Every time Tae-jin and Zoya were in a room, they fought. It was passionate, fiery, and intellectual, but beneath the friction, a raw, primal attraction was boiling over. They argued over logistics, but their bodies naturally gravitated toward one another in crowded rooms. The tension was a ticking bomb waiting for a spark. Wow, did you see that, guys? The tension in that room is literally off the charts. Zoya is not playing around. She walked into that billionaire's office looking like a runway model and totally checked him. And Tae-jin, you can tell he is not used to a woman standing up to him, especially someone as gorgeous and lethal as Zoya. That eye contact, that close proximity, we are barely 2 chapters in and the chemistry is already giving me butterflies. And what about Gia, just watching them from the screens? Usually the fiancé is the villain, but she looks like she's scheming something completely different. What do you guys think? Is Gia going to be a problem or is she playing her own game? Let's get into the next part because I cannot wait to see what happens when these two finally snap. The spark came at midnight. An unauthorized black sedan breached the perimeter of the tech compound. Alarms blared, painting the glass walls in flashing red light. Tae-jin was in the middle of a high-stakes video call, but the moment the alarm hit, Zoya was in his ear through his earpiece, her voice a calm, commanding velvet. Without breaking his sentence to his investors, Tae-jin moved exactly as Zoya instructed, a deadly synchronized dance. They moved together as if they had been partners for a lifetime, locking down the compound and neutralizing the threat in under 40 seconds without a single shot fired. The raw adrenaline of the moment left them both breathing heavily in the dark security corridor. Later that night, Tae-jin walked into the server room and found Zoya asleep on the leather couch, a glowing tablet resting on her chest. For the first time, her fierce armor was down. The harsh neon lights cast shadows over her flawless cheekbones. Tae-jin stood there, his heart doing something dangerously irregular. He slowly took off his custom wool jacket and draped it over her shoulders, his fingers lingering for a fraction of a second against her warm brown skin. It wasn't just lust anymore. It was a devastating, terrifying recognition. The next evening, Gia found Zoya by the compound's neon-lit indoor waterfall. The heiress handed the operative a cup of tea. "He trusts you," Gia observed quietly. Zoya took the tea, her Naomi Campbell-like gaze piercing the heiress. "He shouldn't. Trust has to be mutual, and I don't trust him." Gia smiled, a genuine, cunning curve of her lips. "I've been digging into the syndicate's offshore tech shipments," Gia murmured. "I found irregularities from 3 years ago. The London server grid explosion." Zoya's blood ran cold. The London explosion. The accident that had incinerated the building her 22-year-old brother was working in. She had taken this job specifically to find the ghost in the machine who murdered her blood. "What kind of irregularities?" Zoya demanded, her voice dropping to a dangerous, raw frequency. The truth unspooled in Tae-jin's private, dimly lit penthouse library at 2 a.m. Zoya and Tae-jin were huddled over a massive glowing terminal, their shoulders brushing, the heat between them suffocating. "Here," Zoya breathed, her finger tracing a line of code, the authorization string that bypassed the safety protocols in London. "It's a master code." Tae-jin leaned in, his cheek almost touching hers. He smelled of rain and dark espresso. He stared at the screen, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. "That clearance belongs to my uncle," he whispered, the realization shattering his composure. "He runs the offshore tech subsidiaries." Zoya turned to him, tears of raw, suppressed grief shining in her fierce eyes. "That code caused an overload that killed 22 people, including my younger brother." Tae-jin froze. The silence in the room was deafening. He looked at the woman who had invaded his life, realizing the depth of her pain. "You used the assassination threat as cover to get to me," he said, his voice ragged, "to investigate my family." "I understand what your empire did to my family," Gia yelled, the professional facade finally breaking. She stepped flush against him, her chest heaving, pushing her finger into his chest. "You built a kingdom so massive you went blind to the monsters living inside it." "My problem," Tae-jin snarled softly, his hands suddenly gripping her waist, pulling her flush against his hard body, "is that I trusted the wrong blood. And you," Zoya breathed, looking up at his beautiful, tortured face, "trust no one." The space between them vanished. Tae-jin crashed his lips down on hers. It wasn't sweet. It was a collision of grief, fury, and explosive pent-up lust. Zoya gasped against his mouth, her hands tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer as his hands roamed down the curve of her spine, pressing her against the edge of the terminal. The kiss was deep, wet, and bruising, a desperate claiming in the dark. For 4 intoxicating seconds, they consumed each other. Then Zoya shoved him back, her chest heaving, her lips swollen. "That was a mistake," she lied, her voice shaking. "You're engaged." "Whatever this is between us," Tae-jin rasped, his eyes dark with undisguised hunger, "I know." "Hold up! Everybody pause. Did you guys feel that? That kiss was everything. The angst, the betrayal, the tension exploding. I am screaming. He just grabbed her and it was pure fire. And the tragedy of her brother, finding out it was his uncle who pulled the trigger? This is top-tier Afro-Korean drama right here. But Zoya pushing him away because of Gia shows she is an absolute queen with morals. Little does she know, Gia is basically her bestie now. How is Tae-jin going to handle his uncle? He has to choose between his blood family and the woman he is falling dangerously in love with. Drop your predictions in the comments right now. Let's get into the finale. Outside the library, Gia had heard everything. The argument, the heavy silence, the undeniable truth of their passion. Instead of jealousy, she felt a profound sense of clarity. She met Zoya in the neon-lit garden an hour later. "The engagement will end," Gia told Zoya smoothly, her face illuminated by the city lights. "We were a business arrangement, and business is shifting. I want to help you burn his uncle to the ground to save the legitimate parts of this empire." 3 weeks later, the boardroom was a shark tank. Dozens of executives, government officials, and the uncle himself sat around the massive glass table. Tae-jin stood at the head, looking like a lethal god of the underworld. Zoya stood quietly by the door, her eyes locked on him. Gia sat flawlessly composed. "For 3 years," Tae-jin's voice sliced through the room like a katana, "illegal server overloads and tech smuggling have been routed through our networks. This caused the London grid fire, killing 22 innocent people." The room erupted into chaos. Tae-jin slammed his hand on the table, silencing them. He turned his dead obsidian eyes to his uncle. "The man responsible is sitting in this room." The uncle stood, his face pale, shouting about disrespect and family loyalty. But before he could finish, the boardroom doors swung open. Cybercrime detectives flooded the room in dark suits. The sharp click of handcuffs, echoing in the immaculate room, was the sweetest sound Zoya had ever heard. "You destroyed this family," his uncle spat as he was dragged away. "No," Tae-jin said, his voice cold and absolute. "For the first time, I am protecting it." He looked across the room. His eyes found Zoya. "I'm correcting the mistake," his gaze promised her. "I know," her dark eyes answered back. 6 months later, the syndicate was completely reformed, the dark money seized and donated to a foundation in London named after Zoya's brother and the other victims. Gia had cleanly broken the engagement, using the leverage to launch her own untouchable political empire. The crisp autumn air of Seoul swept over an elite charity gala in Gangnam. The flashing lights of paparazzi strobed like lightning as the sleek black car pulled up. Tae-jin stepped out first, looking devastatingly handsome in a sharp tuxedo, but the cameras went rabid when he offered his hand to the woman inside. Zoya stepped onto the red carpet, a goddess carved from bronze. She wore a deep, backless burgundy gown that clung to her curves, her natural hair styled elegantly, highlighting those fierce Naomi-like cheekbones. She leaned in and whispered something into Tae-jin's ear. He threw his head back and gave a genuine, breathtaking laugh, a sight so rare that the photos broke the internet in an hour. Later, away from the flashing lights, they stood on the penthouse balcony, the neon sprawl of Seoul glittering endlessly below them. Tae-jin stepped behind her, his strong arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent. "Are you regretting staying yet?" he murmured, his lips brushing her skin, sending fire through her veins. Zoya laughed, a warm, unguarded sound. "Ask me again in 6 months." He turned her around to face him. His eyes weren't those of a cold CEO or a ruthless syndicate heir. They were just his, vulnerable, raw, and entirely devoted to her. "You're still infuriating," she whispered, tracing his sharp jawline. "You're still insubordinate," he fired back, pulling her hips flush against his. "I work for you," she teased softly. "You absolutely do not," he groaned, right before he kissed her. It was a kiss of absolute certainty, deep, consuming, and fiercely sensual. They had built a love out of fire and truth, an empire that belonged entirely to them. And that is how you claim your throne. Guys, I am in tears. The way Tae-jin completely dismantled his own corrupt uncle to get justice for Zoya's brother, that is top-tier husband material right there. And Gia stepping up as the ultimate boss lady ally to run her own political empire? We love women supporting women. But that final scene on the balcony, the burgundy dress, the viral laugh, the way he holds her, the raw passion between them is unmatched. Zoya didn't just change the game, she rewrote the whole code. Let me know in the comments if you guys want more stories in this neon-lit, high-stakes Afro-Lux stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next week for the final part.